The sun blazed overhead as soft waves lapped gently against the white sand beaches of Miami, Florida. Spring had arrived with its usual warmth, bringing blooming magnolia trees and vibrant bougainvillea that lined the streets of Coral Gables. It was the perfect season for weddings. And for Emma Carter, it was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Emma stood inside the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, surrounded by white peonies, pale pink roses, and elegant chandeliers. Her ivory wedding gown fit like a dream, hugging her curves perfectly, and her hair cascaded in soft curls over her shoulders. She was radiant, but as she waited at the end of the aisle, smiling nervously, there was no sign of her fiancé, Daniel Reyes. He never showed up. At first, everyone assumed it was a delay, maybe traffic, or a wardrobe malfunction. But when the officiant finally stepped forward and announced that Daniel had not been seen since early that morning, panic began to spread. Phones buzzed, texts went unanswered, and soon enough, the truth came out. Daniel had left Emma at the altar and taken every penny they had saved for their future together. It turned out he had access to all their joint accounts, and sometime during the night before the wedding, he had transferred over $200,000 into an offshore account. His car was gone from the hotel parking lot, and so was his suitcase. He vanished without a word. Emma collapsed onto one of the velvet chairs, stunned. Her bridesmaids rushed to her side, but nothing could ease the heartbreak or humiliation. In front of nearly 200 guests, she had been abandoned, betrayed, and robbed, all on what was meant to be the most beautiful day of her life. But the Carters were not a family to take such an insult lightly. Emma's older brother, Jason, was a former Marine turned private investigator. He didn't say much after hearing the news, just clenched his jaw and started making calls. Within hours, he had enlisted the help of a cybersecurity expert, a forensic accountant, and a few old friends who owed him favors. They tracked Daniel's phone, his credit card usage, even his facial recognition data from airport cameras. And 4 days later, they found him. He was hiding out in Cancun, Mexico, living it up in a luxury resort under a fake name. He'd already bought himself a new wardrobe, booked a yacht charter, and was flirting with cocktail waitresses by the pool. Jason and 2 associates flew down and confronted him in his suite. There was no violence, just a calm, chilling conversation where Jason made it clear, "You stole from my sister. You broke her heart. We're going to make sure you regret this for the rest of your life." Back in Florida, Emma filed a civil lawsuit for emotional distress, breach of contract. They had signed a prenuptial agreement, and financial fraud. With the evidence gathered by Jason and the investigators, the case was airtight. In court, Daniel tried to play the victim, claiming he panicked, that he wasn't ready for marriage, that he didn't mean to cause harm. But the judge saw through it. The verdict was swift and merciless. Daniel was ordered to pay Emma $1.3 million in damages, including compensation for the stolen funds, emotional suffering, and punitive damages for his deceitful behavior. By the time summer rolled around, Emma had moved on, emotionally and financially. She sold the wedding dress she never got to walk down the aisle in and donated the proceeds to a women's shelter. She took a vacation to Maui, then spent a month traveling solo across Europe. She returned more confident, more independent, and more aware of her own strength than ever before. And then came Liam. They met at a charity gala in Tampa Bay, hosted by a mutual friend. Liam was a marine biologist working with sea turtle conservation programs along the Gulf Coast. He had a quiet charm, a deep voice, and eyes that smiled even when his lips didn't. Their connection was instant. Unlike Daniel, Liam listened. He asked about Emma's dreams, her fears, her favorite books. He didn't try to impress her with flashy gestures or expensive gifts. Instead, he invited her to volunteer with him at a beach cleanup, cooked dinner under the stars, and told her stories about the ocean like they were ancient legends. 6 months after they met, Liam proposed, not in a crowded restaurant or on a helicopter tour above Miami, but quietly, on a bench overlooking the Everglades at sunset. This time, Emma said yes, and this time, she knew she was marrying the right man. Years later, when people would ask how they met, Emma would smile and say, "I guess I needed to lose someone to find someone better." And sometimes, when the wind blew just right and the sun dipped low over the water, she'd remember that warm spring day in Florida, the day everything fell apart, and realize that it was also the day everything truly began. Emma often thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly joy could turn into heartbreak, and how fast betrayal could become strength. She used to believe that love meant never being hurt, but now she understood, real love wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience, trust, and choosing someone who chose you back, every single day. Her new life with Liam was quiet but full. They lived in a small coastal town near Tampa, where they volunteered at a marine wildlife rescue center. On weekends, they would wake up early, make coffee together and walk along the beach collecting trash so sea turtles could swim safely. Their home was filled with books, seashells, and laughter. They didn't need luxury resorts or expensive dinners, just each other, and the peace that came from knowing they had found something real. Emma never forgot what Daniel did to her, but she didn't hate him anymore. In fact, she was grateful, not for the pain but for what came after it. Because of him, she learned to stand on her own. Because of him, she discovered courage she never knew she had. And because of him, she met Liam, the man who showed her what true love really looked like. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from their porch swing, Liam turned to her and said, "You know, I think everything happens for a reason." Emma smiled softly and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yeah," she whispered, "even the worst days can lead to the best beginnings." And with that, the wind carried away the last memory of the man who left her standing alone and brought her closer to the one who would always stay.
In the heart of Paris, where cobblestone streets whispered secrets and the Seine shimmered under the golden light of dusk, lived a young Italian woman named Isabella Moretti. She had come to Paris 2 years ago to study art history at the prestigious Sorbonne, dreaming of one day curating exhibitions in the Louvre. With her dark curls, olive skin, and sharp wit, Isabella was not only beautiful but fiercely independent, a woman who trusted her instincts above all else. But there was something she never told anyone, a deep-rooted pain from her family's past. Her parents often spoke of France with bitterness, especially when it came to one name, a Dupont. Years ago, Isabella's father, a respected architect, had been involved in a major construction project alongside Lucien Dupont, an influential French shipping magnate. Their partnership collapsed after a bitter dispute over money and creative control. The friendship turned into enmity, and both families swore never to have anything to do with each other again. So when Isabella first saw Captain Antoine Dupont, she didn't know he was the son of Lucien, and she certainly didn't expect him to change her life forever. It happened on a rainy afternoon near the Pont Neuf. Isabella had been sketching the bridge from beneath an umbrella when a sudden gust of wind sent her papers flying into the river. Without thinking, a tall man in a navy blue coat jumped onto the small ledge and dove into the icy water. He swam swiftly, grabbing every page before they disappeared beneath the current. Moments later, he climbed back up, soaked and shivering, but smiling as he handed her the soaked sketches. "You're lucky I'm used to saving things," he said with a wink. "I'm a captain, after all." She looked at him, stunned by his confidence and charm. He had chiseled features, salt and pepper hair that hinted at both youth and experience, and eyes the color of stormy seas, intense, deep, and full of mystery. "I'm Isabella," she said quietly. "And I'm Antoine," he replied. "Antoine Dupont." The name hit her like thunder. Her grandfather had once told her stories about the Duponts, their pride, their betrayal, and how her family would never forgive them. And yet, this man had just risked his life for her silly sketches. Over the next few weeks, fate kept bringing them together. First at a gallery opening, then at a cafe near Notre Dame, and finally during a charity regatta on the Seine, where Isabella learned that Antoine was not just a charming stranger, but a decorated naval officer and now the owner of a luxury yacht charter company. Despite herself, Isabella found herself drawn to him. He was intelligent, passionate about history, and had traveled the world, yet he listened to her like no one ever had. He asked about her dreams, supported her ambitions, and never tried to impress her with wealth or status. Instead, he surprised her with handwritten notes tucked into books, took her stargazing on the rooftop of his apartment building, and once chartered a hot air balloon so she could see Paris from above, like a painting, he said. Still, she resisted. "I can't do this," she told him one night as they walked along the Seine. "My family would never understand." They hate yours. Antoine stopped walking and turned to face her. Then let's not tell them, he said gently. Let's just be us. But what if we end up hurting them? What if we fail? We might, he admitted. But love isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing someone even when the world tells you not to. His words stayed with her long after he left. One evening, Antoine invited Isabella to sail with him on his private yacht from Le Havre to Honfleur. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend away, just the two of them, champagne, laughter, and the sea. But halfway through the journey, a storm rolled in. The sky turned black, the waves rose like mountains, and the boat began to take on water. Antoine fought to keep control, shouting orders to his crew. But when a massive wave crashed against the hull, Isabella was thrown across the deck. Without hesitation, Antoine lunged for her, catching her wrist just before she slipped into the raging sea. His other hand gripped the railing, his body stretched out over the edge, rain and sea water battering him. Hold on, he shouted. I've got you. With the last of his strength, he pulled her back on board. Both were bruised, freezing, and shaken, but alive. As the storm passed and dawn broke over the Normandy coast, Isabella looked at Antoine and realized the truth. This man had risked everything for her, not just his life, but his pride, his reputation, and the expectations of his family. And she had fallen deeply, irrevocably in love with him. When they returned to Paris, Isabella knew it was time to confront the past. Together, she and Antoine arranged a quiet dinner between their fathers. There were tense silences, old wounds reopened, and more than one glass of wine spilled in frustration. But slowly, the walls began to crumble. They talked, really talked, about what had gone wrong, about misunderstandings, pride, and lost opportunities. And in the end, Lucien Dupont reached out and shook hands with Isabella's father. Not as enemies anymore, but as men who had raised children who loved each other. Months later, under the blooming chestnut trees of Montmartre, Antoine proposed to Isabella on a bench overlooking the city. He didn't get down on one knee. Instead, he simply took her hand and said, "You are my compass, my calm sea, and my greatest adventure. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "A yes, heir." Their wedding was held on a restored 19th century ship docked along the Seine, a symbol of the journey that had brought them together. And as they danced under strings of fairy lights, surrounded by family and friends, Isabella smiled at Antoine and said, "You were right. Love is worth every risk."